Hey there, I am super duper excited for today because I am going to be showing you 10 of my all-time favorite ground beef recipes. I really hope you could find a recipe for yourself, and let's go get to cooking. We're kicking today off with probably one of the best ways ever to make a quesadilla. So in my pan, I have a pound of ground beef. I'm adding one diced up white onion to that ground beef. Just crumble the ground beef up and cook it completely through. Once it is totally cooked through, just remove any of the excess grease. And then you'll add in 2 tablespoons of your favorite type of taco seasoning, along with a half a cup of water. Stir everything together and let this simmer on your stove for about a minute or two. The last few ingredients I'll be tossing in is just a can of drained and rinsed black beans, a drained can of corn, and 1/4 cup of salsa. Use any type of salsa you like or have on hand. Go ahead and stir this to combine and then remove it from the stove. You'll need 2 sheet pans for this recipe, but for the first sheet pan, I'm spraying it with plenty of nonstick spray. And then I'm going to pull 7 tortillas out. These are the large burrito-sized tortillas, and they will overlap a little bit. Just line them around the sheet pan and then place one in the center. After I dumped that ground beef mixture out on those tortillas and spread it out as even as possible, I'm going to be sprinkling about 1.5 cups of cheese on top. I just used Colby Jack cheese and cheddar, but use any type of cheese you like. I sprinkled the top with 2 sliced green onions, but that is optional. And now I'm folding the tortillas in to ensure that the cheese and the ground beef mixture is covered with tortilla. Now with the back of this sheet pan, I sprayed it with nonstick spray, and then you'll be placing it right on top of your quesadilla, just like this. And then it'll bake in a preheated oven to 425 degrees for 20 minutes. After those 20 minutes, remove the pan on top and broil it for an additional 1 to 3 minutes or until the top gets crispy like this. If you've never tried a sheet pan quesadilla before, this is your time. You definitely have to try it. It has very minimal ingredients, it's delicious, and it made for great leftovers for lunch the next day. I haven't made a John Wayne casserole in what feels like is forever, so now that's what we're making. In my pan right here, I just added 1 pound of ground beef along with 1/2 of a white onion that's diced. Cook the ground beef up until it is completely cooked through, and then remove any excess grease. Now is the time you'll be adding in your 1.5 tablespoons of taco seasoning with 1/4 cup of water. Stir these ingredients all together and bring this up to a simmer. Once it does start to simmer, you're going to add in your 1 can of Rotel along with 1 can of drained corn. Stir all of these ingredients to combine. Into this medium-sized bowl, you're going to add 2 cups of Bisquick along with 1 cup of water. Stir these 2 ingredients together. You might have to add a little bit more water in or a little bit more Bisquick until it looks something like this. Now into this smaller bowl, you are going to make the creamy mixture now. So it's just 1/4 cup of mayonnaise along with about 7.5 ounces of this chive and onion cream cheese. This stuff is so good. You're also going to be adding in just about 1/8 teaspoon of garlic powder and a dash of salt and pepper. Whisk these ingredients together. I'm using my large round baking dish for this recipe, or you could use a 9x13 baking dish. Make sure to spray it with nonstick spray, and then to the bottom add the Bisquick mixture and spread it out evenly. On top of that, go ahead and pour the ground beef mixture we made up on the stove, and then you will be adding the creamy mixture over that. Spread that out as even as possible, and then you'll be sprinkling 1 cup of shredded sharp cheddar cheese and 1 cup of mozzarella cheese on the very very top. This will bake in a preheated oven to 325 degrees for about 40 minutes. Here's my plate of food. I topped mine with cherry tomatoes and sour cream. This meal is so flavorsome and hearty. Like I said previously, I really need to make this John Wayne casserole more often. Now we're making spaghetti and meatballs. This meatball recipe is hands down my all-time favorite meatball recipe ever. I definitely suggest you trying it. So to begin, in my large bowl, I have a pound of some ground beef. To the ground beef, I added 1 diced up white onion. I made sure I diced the onion up very finely. It'll turn out better like that in the end. I also added a tablespoon of some minced garlic, 1/4 cup of Parmesan cheese, and ricotta. The ricotta cheese might sound weird adding it in, but it adds great flavor and texture. I also added in 1/2 cup of some breadcrumbs and a few tablespoons of fresh parsley and a little bit of some salt and pepper. If you don't have fresh parsley on hand, you could definitely skip that step. Lastly, I added in about 3 tablespoons of some milk. Just stir all of this together. I'm rolling my meatballs out into about golf ball sizes. That's the size my family likes. And then I'm placing them on my wire rack on my cooking tray. If you don't have a wire rack like this, you could just directly put them on your cooking tray. This will bake on 425 degrees for about 20 to 25 minutes. While I do have our meatballs in the oven baking, I'm just going to boil up our spaghetti noodles. I'm using a little under a pound of those. And then for the marinara sauce, of course, you could definitely make your own marinara sauce. I've done that many times before, but I was just feeling like using a jar of Prego on that night. Here's the finished product. I just topped my spaghetti and meatballs with some Parmesan cheese. These meatballs have the best rich flavor. They are just amazing, and I just can't even describe how delicious these meatballs are. Every time we have a family gathering, my family always asks me to make them. Now we're going to be making this Mexican beefy and potato recipe. This one's a hit. So I'm going to begin by peeling and dicing 2 yellow potatoes, 1 onion, and 1 green bell pepper into smaller pieces. After I am finished with that, I'm going to set those to the side. Over to my pan, I have a pound of some ground beef in there. I'm just going to cook this ground beef until it's about 80% of the way cooked. Now that it is 80% of the way cooked, if yours is super greasy, go ahead and remove some of the grease. But now I'm adding in the vegetables that we just chopped up, and I'm going to stir them around for about 2 to 3 minutes. After letting that cook together for a few minutes, it's time to add in your tablespoon of minced garlic. Let the garlic become fragrant. Then you're going to add in the rest of your ingredients. So you'll want to add in 8 ounces of tomato sauce, 1.5 cups of beef broth, and then for all of the seasonings I'm adding in, I'm just doing 1/2 teaspoon of salt, just a dash of pepper, 1 bay leaf, a teaspoon of cumin, and then a teaspoon of coriander. You're going to stir this all together and then put the lid on top and let this simmer on your stove for about 10 minutes. Here we are 10 minutes later. I'm going to remove the lid, give this a really good stir, and you see all the liquid in there. You pretty much want that to evaporate, so let it simmer uncovered for an additional 10 minutes. And then once it looks something like this, remove the bay leaf, and then it is ready to serve. You could really serve this meal however you choose to do so, but what we like to do is serve it with some white rice and then some crispy tortillas on the side with guacamole, cherry tomatoes, and lime and cilantro. This is so delicious. These mini meatloafs are such a classic meal for my family in our home, so we're going to start with the meatloaf mixture. In this medium-sized bowl, I'm adding a pound of some ground beef. My ground beef was 80/20. Next, I'm adding 1 egg, 1/2 of an onion. I did dice the onion super duper finely. 1/4 cup of some milk, 3 tablespoons of ketchup, 3 teaspoons of some minced garlic, 1/4 cup of panko breadcrumbs, just some salt and pepper to your taste, and then 1/2 teaspoon of paprika, and then 1/2 teaspoon of some Italian seasoning. You're going to mix this all together. I mixed it with my meat masher, and then I ended up mixing it with my hands. Now to work on the vegetables, I have about a pound of some yellow potatoes. I just cut them into bite-sized pieces. You're going to want to add 1 pound of some green beans to those potatoes. I did trim my green beans and they are fresh. Next, I'm adding 1 tablespoon of some olive oil with just a dash of some pepper and a teaspoon of some garlic salt. Mix this to combine. After I lined my sheet pan with some parchment paper and dumped my vegetables on that, I'm going to be forming the meatloaf mixture into 4 mini meatloafs. This is actually going to bake in my preheated oven to 425 degrees for about 25 minutes. While our dinner is baking away in the oven, I'm going to start on the ketchup mixture for on top of the meatloaf. So I just added in this little bowl a 1/3 cup of ketchup, a tablespoon of brown sugar, a 1/2 teaspoon of garlic powder, onion powder, just a little dash of some salt and pepper, a 1/2 teaspoon of white vinegar, and you're just going to whisk this all together. So now that my meatloaf is out of the oven, I'm just going to brush this ketchup mixture on top of each of the little meatloafs. This is going to continue to bake in the oven for an additional 15 to 20 minutes. Here's my plate of food ready to be eaten. It's kind of funny, but one of my daughter's first foods she ever enjoyed eating was meatloaf. I think it's just because of the texture maybe, but I don't know. This meal is delicious. These baked quesadillas are definitely a go-to meal here in my home. We really love them. So to get them started, I'm just cooking up 1 pound of some ground beef in my pan, or you could use ground turkey, whatever your preference is. After my ground beef was through cooking, I drained out any excess grease, and now I'm going to be seasoning it with about 1.5 tablespoons of some taco seasoning, and then I added a 1/3 cup of some water. I'm just going to stir this mixture all together to combine. Over to my sheet pan, I have it lined with some parchment paper, and then I just sprayed it with some avocado oil spray. You could use any type of tortilla you like for this recipe, but I just used the little street flour tortillas. Those are my favorite for this recipe. Anyways, I just put a little bit of some refried beans on the bottom of the tortillas. Next, you'll add a scoop of the taco mixture and then just a little bit of some Colby Jack cheese on top. You could add any other toppings you like inside of these quesadillas, like jalapenos. Seriously, anything you like, go ahead and add it in. I placed another tortilla on the very top and then sprayed it with some avocado oil spray. This will bake in a preheated oven to 450 degrees for about 8 to 12 minutes, or until the cheese is nice and melty and the top of the tortillas are crisp. Here's the finished product. I just served it with some salsa, sour cream, jalapenos, lime, and iceberg lettuce. I really love making these quesadillas because it kind of kicks the normal quesadillas up a notch, and then it's just really fun and easy to make. My family enjoys it. These taco stuffed peppers are mega good, and then they're also lower carb. So if you're looking for a lower carb option, this recipe is so good. I have 4 green bell peppers, or you could use any color bell pepper you like. I sliced them in half, and now I'm removing the seeds and everything from the inside. I placed the bell pepper halves in my 9x13 baking dish, and now I'm pouring 1/4 cup of water in there. These are going to go in my preheated oven to 350 degrees to start softening while I work on the rest of the ingredients. So in my pan, I have a pound of ground beef. I'm just cooking it up once it is through cooking. If your ground beef is extra greasy, go ahead and remove any excess grease. But now I just added 2 tablespoons of taco seasoning with 1/4 cup of water. Mix this all together to combine. To give this extra flavor and creaminess, I'm adding in 1/2 cup of salsa. You could really use any type of salsa you like. And then 1/3 cup of sour cream. Stir this all together and let the sour cream melt down. The last thing you'll add in is 1 can of drained and rinsed pinto beans, or you could use black beans, whatever your preference is. Give this a really good stir, and now it's time to stuff our bell peppers. So I pulled the bell peppers out of the oven, and now you're just going to place a little scoop of that bean and beefy mixture in each of the bell pepper halves. After I sprinkled plenty of Colby Jack cheese on top, this is going to go back in my oven to bake on 350 for about 25 to 30 minutes, or until the cheese is melty and the bell peppers are nice and tender. This is my plate of food. I sprinkled it with plenty of cilantro, iceberg lettuce, served it with guacamole and taco sauce. These peppers are so good, and that taco meat on the inside is 100% delicious. Now we're making this classic tater tot casserole. I haven't made tater tot casserole in a while. To begin, I'm going to dice up 1 onion into smaller pieces. Now moving over to my stove, I'm adding 1 pound of ground beef along with the onion right in there, and then you are just going to cook the ground beef completely through. Some of you guys might have seen me do this trick in the past, but my mom taught me it when I was growing up. With any of the grease left over in your pan after you cook your meat, just wiggle a paper towel around in there until all of it's absorbed. Now I'm going to be adding in the rest of the ingredients. About 1 tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce, a half a teaspoon of thyme, a little dash of garlic powder and onion powder, and a dash of salt and pepper. Go ahead and give this a good stir. Now we're going to make up the mixture that will go over the top of everything. In this little bowl, I'm adding 1 can of cream of mushroom soup, followed by 2/3 cup of milk. Whisk this together. Over to my greased baking dish, or you could use an 8x8 baking dish. Pour the ground beef and onion mixture in there and then spread it out. Over the top of the ground beef mixture, you will be adding your tater tots. Just put them right next to each other until you could barely see that ground beef mixture. Now that our tater tots are right next to each other, pretty snug, looking cute, I'm going to be pouring the cream of mushroom soup mixture over the top that we made up. Try to do it as even as possible, but mine is always far from perfect. Over the top of everything, you will be sprinkling about 1 cup of Colby Jack cheese or sharp cheddar cheese. Bake this in a preheated oven to 350 degrees for about 45 to 50 minutes, or until the top of the tater tots are golden and everything is heated through. This is my plate of food. I serve this alongside of a side salad. This is probably one of the easiest tater tot casseroles ever. It has great flavor and it just comes together in little to no time. Today, by making these Crunchwraps, they're kind of like a fun twist on burritos and tacos. Plus, they're really simple to throw together. So in my pan right here, I have 1 pound of some ground beef. I'm going to cook it completely through. Once it is cooked through, I'm going to add about 1 tablespoon of some taco seasoning, along with 1/4 cup of some water, and I'm just going to stir this all together to combine. Now we're going to assemble our Crunchwraps. I was not joking when I said these are easy to throw together. So onto my large burrito-sized tortilla, I added a layer of some refried beans. On top of that, the ground beef mixture that we made up, a tostada. The tostada is going to add a ton of nice crunch, and then some sour cream on top of that. You could kind of add whatever toppings you like. For example, my husband doesn't care for sour cream, so I didn't add sour cream on his. But anyways, I also added some iceberg lettuce, cherry tomatoes, cheese, and then I did cut a small circle out of another tortilla to place on top, and that's going to help seal it. So you see me just folding the edges in. Now over to my pan, I'm going to spray it with some oil spray. You could use any type of oil you like. This is just going to help crisp up the Crunchwrap and seal the seam. So once the oil was hot, I just added the Crunchwrap down and I cooked it on each side for about 30 seconds. Here is the finished product. I'm just going to cut it in half and show you all the yumminess inside. My family absolutely loves these Crunchwraps. I served mine with some salsa, some more iceberg lettuce, guacamole, sour cream, and some lime. These are 10 out of 10, such an easy dinner that I love making. The first time I ever made this beef casserole, I was skeptical, but now my family's hooked. I'm starting out by dicing up one medium-sized white onion and slicing 8 ounces of some white mushrooms. Over to my large pot, I have a pound of some ground beef in there. I'm going to season it with plenty of some salt, pepper, and a teaspoon of some Italian seasoning. You're just going to cook this ground beef completely through. Once the ground beef is cooked, just remove it to a separate plate and set that plate to the side. Now we're going to begin to work on the onions. To my same large pot, I'm adding 2 tablespoons of butter. I let that melt down, and now I'm going to add my diced onion and let this cook for about 5 minutes. Now that my onions are starting to get soft, I'm just adding my 2 teaspoons of some minced garlic. I'm going to stir the garlic around until it becomes fragrant. For the beef broth, I'm adding 2.5 cups of that in with 1.25 cups of some uncooked white rice. To give the rice some extra flavor, I'm adding a teaspoon of some Italian seasoning in. I'm going to give this a really good stir, bring this up to a boil, drop it down to a simmer, and let this simmer covered for 10 minutes. After the 10 minutes of cooking, I remove the lid, and now I'm going to add our sliced mushrooms in, give this a really good stir, put the lid back on top, and cook this for an additional 5 minutes covered, and then I'm going to turn the stove off and let this sit covered for an additional 10 minutes. So here it is. After all of that time, you're going to add back in your cooked ground beef, then add in 1 can of some cream of mushroom soup, a 1/2 cup of milk, 1/2 cup of sour cream, 1 cup of some shredded sharp cheddar cheese, and then you're going to stir everything together. I placed the casserole in a greased 9x13 baking dish. I spread it out as even as possible. Then you're going to add about 1.5 cups of some more shredded sharp cheddar cheese on top. You're going to cover this and bake on 350 for about 20 minutes. Remove the foil and bake it for an additional 5 minutes. Here's the finished product. This came out great. I just served it with some steamed peas. This was actually surprisingly one of my little daughter's favorite meals to eat when she was a little bit younger. I do think it's because it tastes good. Also, it was very easy for her to eat. I really hope you found a recipe for yourself today, and I would love to have you here. So go ahead and subscribe down below the video. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.